It has been a minute. Where's the share button?
Do you have a co-host?
I might not.
So you need to go to the main room, the main lobby, and turn off the recording.
I need to turn off the recording.
Oh, no, maybe not. If you're recording, then no. If you're not leaving.
Mike's co-host.
Am I?
Yeah.
Just show me. I can record. Ah, there we go. There we go. You guys see that?
Yep. I think with all of Zoom's money, they could fix their Wayland support.
You would think.
They must have made obscene money during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So
yes, where do you want to hang out first?
I mean, there's only a couple of
the overview,
so we can keep it really casual. So, do you have any questions, Jonathan, based on what I presented in the town hall?
No, I just jumped in, tried to start getting the Eternal demo wallet or testnet wallet.
Okay. So if you go to actually the link for the app, they're linked in the top. There's a banner at the top of the app itself. It tells you which wallet there's two. There's the Eternal and the NuFi wallet.
I grabbed the Eternal one, and I guess it needs to run from a web server.
It's a browser extension.
So yes, there's you should have gotten a zip file, and then if you go to manage extensions, and there's an option for like use unpacked or something like that, and then in that same banner, there's a little video walkthrough.
Magic.
This may be a silly question. I dropped it in a chat. So I see, Mike, you're sharing the screen, but I'm seeing actually a black.
Oh yeah, am I not?
I can share it.
If everybody sees it, it might be just the bug in the Zoom, and it's just me. So don't.
Yeah, I just
mind
blacklisted you, Danny.
Oh. I'm gonna actually try to leave the room and come back and see. Joey says it's black for him as well. Could we try maybe resharing?
Yeah, I can try resharing.
Zoom is being funky today, is it not?
I broke it by trying to share it before.
Interesting. I still see just a black screen. It says like Mike McNulty is. Ah, there we go. Perfect.
Zoom quit.
Well, I see it now. I see it now.
My computer is wigging out with Zoom today.
Yeah, but I'm seeing it. So maybe Joey, do you see it black for me? Super. Joey sees it as well. So whatever you did, it worked. Now you cannot use it. That will be exciting life in the Zoom. All right, I'll let you guys have it. Oh, and we lost it.
Guys, who forgot to pay the Zoom bill? All right, we got it. We in business?
Yep.
Yes.
There we go. Oh, and then here, Jonathan, that link I just dropped in the chat. If you're trying to get that the unpacked wallet extension, we'll walk through there. So before Zoom started pooping out, yeah, what were we going to dig into here?
Well, I mean, what we were going to talk about, which we didn't talk about really in the town hall itself, is in the testnet we've got this voting center that you're trying to install the test wallet for, Jonathan. We actually aren't proposing. So in testnet, we're testing things. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to actually push them into production. So we're currently not considering the moment to push the voting center, at least as it currently stands, to production. Because when we built this, we actually found that there are security issues with the DREP process that was designed for it. So if we pushed it to production, we would actually end up with those security issues in production. So we're running this as a test so that people can get an idea of how DREPs could work, because it doesn't matter if there are security issues here because it's a test environment. But unless we can address those issues, we're not actually going to push this forward. But the back end environments are what we're going to push forward for Fund 10, and voting app will push forward for Fund 11. So this is, so the test environment serves the purpose of not only letting us test what we're going to push up, but actually so we can, show things that don't work or that they do work, but they're not quite right. So we can get feedback and actually get early input rather than just, oh, well, start again. All right. The functionality is here. So the idea of it is right, but there are issues. And the second part of my presentation, I was actually going to talk about those issues that we found.
Yeah, I want to jump in there a little bit.
Yeah. That's why Ryan's here. That's why he wants the juicy part of the presentation. So if we go, so this slide. So small, but should be all right. So these are the Catalyst registrations for SIP 15 and SIP 36. That's what they look like. And the weaknesses that they have are that there's no actual proof that in the registration, the person who's making the registration owns that voting key. Now, previously, that wasn't considered to be an issue, but it's turned out for DREPs, it actually opens up a few potential holes in the process that may or may not be desirable, and we'd like to try and close those off. There's no on-chain way to identify if a registration is a rep, which is actually a problem, and it requires us to have centralized off-chain registration. So the voting center, if you want to be a rep, actually requires you to register with us as a rep. But that means you can now register on chain and get people to delegate to you, and you can be like, we use terms like shadow DREP, where you're a DREP. You can do everything a DREP can do, except you don't have to play by the rules of any other DREP. Like, your votes aren't going to get de-anonymized because we have no way of knowing if you're a DREP. So,
and granted, we have the carrot that you're not going to earn the DREP rewards if you're not registered through that process, but it doesn't stop somebody, right, from just amassing a ton of voting power and influencing the vote. Maybe they don't care about rewards in that case.
Yeah, right. So we're trying to position Catalyst technology stack to be more agnostic. So it's not like we must run this system and we must vet people. It's like, well, let's build a stack where we don't have to do that. There can be other people that say, oh, we've vetted these DREPs. We're saying these guys are good. Okay, that's great. And people can listen to that, or they can make their own choices, but we can actually now treat all DREPs. If they, what we want to be able to do is treat all DREPs, whether they've given us all of their details or not, the same, so that from a technical perspective, there is no difference. So we can't actually do that with the current registrations. There's a thing in SIP 36 called purpose, but there's no clear way to actually define other purposes or for anybody to reuse that. And in fact, we've had many conversations about how would we ever do that? How would we ever change the purpose and what does it mean? So it's a bit hard to use. We can't include extra data in the registration, which we may want to be able to do, like a DREP might want to put his Twitter handle in his registration. We can't currently do that. We can't register for any other roles. I guess purpose was the idea. Purpose was for that, but there's no way to manage it because there's just a single purpose thing. You'd have to do SIP. We can't tell the difference between if a DApp tries to use purpose one or we try to use purpose one. So there's no way to decollide that space other than convention, which never works. Convention never works and so the idea here with these registrations, especially SIP 36, was that it would be generalized, that we could use it for other things, not just Catalyst. There was this intention there. When you register with SIP 36, the nonces are undefined. So the nonce in the SIP, it says, we recommend you use the current slot number, but it's only a recommendation. And so it's possible for a wallet to use a large nonce. And if you change your registration to another wallet, you get eclipsed by the previous registration. There's actually one wallet that's making large nonces right now. That means that if you moved wallets from that one, you could end up eclipsed. We don't think it's going to be a big issue, but it's not an issue with the wallet. The wallet's not doing anything wrong. It's just that the nonce wasn't properly defined. Right? It's been left open to interpretation. Which means we can't filter it because the nonce is correct. It's accurate. It's just not what everybody else is doing. Right? When you register with SIP 36, you're actual, as a voter, you're actually self-delegating. And for me, that's just a weird concept to say, I'm self-delegating. You know, you're actually registering as a voter. You're not self-delegating, but the way the SIP36 works is you're actually self-delegating. And that's one of the reasons we can't tell the difference between a rep, a voter, and somebody who's delegating, because it's exactly the same, regardless of who you are. And there's no way to specify that a delegation is for a fixed fund. So if I wanted to delegate to you or anybody here, I've permanently delegated until I put another registration on the chain to de-delegate. So if I only want to delegate for a particular fund, I have to continuously re-delegate. So there's no way to actually time box your registrations or anything. So there's exploits that we've sort of identified with this. So all reps can't be treated equally, which we discussed. There's no way for a voter to know if they're actually delegating to a rep or not without some sort of centralized validation. And we want to get away from any centralized necessity in the system. Anyone can register with anyone's voting key. So, which is how you can do things like sell your voting power, for example. Right. So I can control a stake key and I could use somebody else's voting key and give them my voting power. So I can make a registration to sell my voting power in this sense. Right. Reps can change their voting keys just before the voting event, and there's no way for a voter to know that happened, and there's no way for them to fix it. They would just be locked out of the event, which is a pretty bad exploit. So if you had you wouldn't get away with it very often, but a rep could actually amass a huge amount of voting power and then just lock everybody out, even unintentionally. We don't want to have that as a possibility. Reps can delegate to reps, which is just weird. And if they do, they lose the ability to vote for the people who originally delegated to them, because they actually lose their voting key. Right? When I was first thinking about this, I thought, hang on a second, they got their they're going to, I thought the delegations would cascade, but they actually don't. So what happens is you would delegate to this rep with their key, and when they delegate, they actually lose their key, because now they're delegating. Their registration has the delegate's key that they're delegating to, not their key anymore. So you end up in this, again, it's similar to this, the rep can change their voting key and there's no way for a voter to know. So if the delegate just redelegates, all the people who delegated to him, they're just high and dry. And the registrations with a high nonce issue. So what am I proposing to do? And this is part of our Catalyst Voices proposal. So if we go to the next slide, Mike. So rather than try and fix these, which is what I've done, Mike, is he there? Yep.
Did not change for you?
Not yet. Next slide.
Let's try that again.
So rather than try and fix this, because I did originally when I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, maybe we can mitigate some of this stuff, and so okay, so this is what I'm proposing as the new format. So it's based on what we've currently got, but it's designed to fix the issues that we've identified and add some features. So I've changed the number of the registration metadata, and the reason for that is so that there's no ambiguity. SIPs, the original Catalyst registrations are unambiguously the original Catalyst registrations. What happened, Mike?
Apologize, guys. I don't know what is going on with Zoom. Try killing video. Maybe that'll make a difference, but I don't know what's going on.
Do you want me to try to share?
Yeah, maybe if you want to try taking it, Danny.
Steven, can you message me the original slide deck on Slack, please?
Yes.
Okay, share the screen. All right, that works.
Yep. So very last slide.
There you go.
All right. So what I did here is I took the original registrations and I looked at all the issues and how we could solve them and how we can use it in a more composable, generalized way. So what I've done is I've taken the role keys and the arrayed role keys. So that allows us to have, you know, if you register, you can actually register with a single key. If you're registering as a voter, that's all you do. Right. If you're delegating, well, you'll use the array method so that you can actually apportion your delegation. But what I've added to that is you don't just register. If you control the key in the signature part of the registration, you actually sign it. You countersign this with that key as well. So you're asserting not only do I own the stake address, but I actually own the voting key or the role key in this case, right? So that we can verify, yes, you do control both. You are that entity. You are that thing. You're not somebody trying to be that thing. You are that thing, right? There are instances where you want to be able to use somebody else's key, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The payment address is the same, but it's optional because not all roles will have payments. So if there's no necessity for a role to have a payment, you don't have to put that in there. The nonce will specify that as being the slot number at the time the registration is made. And so we can validate that and we can say, we will only accept a registration at a snapshot time if its nonce is less than that. And we'll take the greatest nonce as the one that's valid in the valid transaction. So the role is what used to be called purpose. So the role now defines, are you a voter? Are you a rep? Are you a something? Are you a whatever? Whatever the roles that the DApp might define? And we decollide those by making a UUID. So every DApp will assign itself a random version 4 UUID. There's no requirement for a registry then. Any DApp can make their own UUID as long as they generate it properly, and they're never going to collide. Right? You'll get hit by a meteor before you do. So that means that a DApp, or every DApp is can make their own roles. So what role 0 is for Catalyst isn't necessarily role 0 for my DEX or role 0 for some other DApp, right? That role is specific to the DApp. There's an optional expiry time. So you can say at this Unix epoch, this registration becomes immediately invalid. So if I want to make it only for, this registration only valid for the duration of the Catalyst event, I can put an expiry time at the end of, say, Fund 10, and it will automatically expire. And we're reserving keys 100 to 999 in case we want to add more standard stuff to it. But we've reserved 8 to 99, but key 100 on, the DApp can actually define their own metadata that they want for roles. So the idea here is that this is something that a DApp would build on. It's not a full specification. It just says, the specification says if the role key is controlled by the wallet, it signs it with the role key. If the role key appears in the array, it signs it such that you can identify which one it is. So in this case here, where I've got two, I've got the two in the example with 2 keys, that role is signing the second of those 2, not the first. So that way, when we check this registration, we can go, okay, that second key is actually owned by this person who's registering. If none of those keys are owned by that, then there won't be a 1 in the signature, and there'll only be a 2, because you can only register if you must always have the second stake address. The way we generate the role keys is we use a derivation path so that every role for every DApp, for every UUID has their own key. They won't collide. And if they use the same, and that'll be fixed in the standard, so that if you move registrations to another wallet, you'll get the same key. You won't end up with a different key because they'll all be deriving from the same method. So that's the concept. And the reason for this is I don't want to build into this like rules that say, other than the basic ones I've just talked about, such as nonce has to be a slot ID and it has to be less than the time when you do your snapshot, that role keys are signed if they are controlled by the wallet. They're countersigned. Things that we can do with this compositional thing, say we have proposers, say there's 2 proposers, say there's me and there's Ryan that are proposing, all right? And that's the first key here is Ryan's, and the second key is mine. and say, this is my registration here to join a group of proposers with me and Ryan. So my signature would look like this down the bottom here. I would have nothing in the first one because that's Ryan's key and I don't control that. But I've signed the second signature. And so what I'm saying is I trust Ryan and I want to be in a group with him. And that's what the proposers group registration will look like. Ryan posts his own registration and he puts his key and my key in the role and he countersigns it with his key. And now if I collect both of those, I can go, well, hang on a second. Stephen signed his, Ryan signed his, and they're the same. Therefore, they are agreeing together in two separate transactions to actually be together in a group because we've countersigned one another in two separate registrations. So it's a way of doing disjoint multi-sig. I could put this on here. If Ryan never puts his registration, we never end up in a group. So if you expand that out to 3 or 4 people, all 4 have to put a registration and agree that they're in that group before that group becomes a real thing, right? And so that's separate from an individual proposer's registration, which would just be your single key. One of the advantages with that is we can actually use these same role keys to do encryption. So I can use the role key as a public key for encryption, and I can use my private key for my role key, encrypt a payload, and then send that to Ryan, for example. And then he can use his private key to decrypt it. And so that allows us to do trustless. And that's one of the reasons for doing it with proposals, right? So if we've made a proposal group, we could actually share our encrypted proposals. We could store them on the Catalyst back end. Nobody in the Catalyst team would be able to see what they are except the encrypted payloads. But everybody who's in that group would be able to see it because they would be able to share the key material and then the encrypted payload. So it's a way of us having, completely decentralized information exchange through the blockchain and off-chain, but trustless. We don't need to trust anything, right? We don't need extra keys because we can use the same keys or actually derivations of them to do this encryption. So this is the sort of functionality I want to build into it. And the idea is we define this as a SIP. So this lays out the general standard. And then for Catalyst, we'll have another document, whether that be a SIP or not, probably will be, that says, these are the roles and this is how we use it. So this is how voter registration works. This is how a proposer works. This is how proposal groups work. This is how whatever the other roles are, we add them on. We just make our own document that says, this is how we use this registration for these roles. And then we would make our own tool to capture them. Another DApp could do the same thing and go, well, I've got this role. This is how I would validate it. This is how we use it. They define their own role document that explains how those roles work in the context of that DAF within this framework. So that's it. This is my current thinking. This is it's still a work in progress, and we'll publish this if we get Catalyst Voices up. This is pretty fundamental to how Catalyst Voices will work because we don't want to have any centralized registration. Both Mike and Ryan want to ask me questions. I'll go with Ryan first.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got 2 questions. First of all, why did you choose 1970 for the metadata label?
Because it's not used, and it's a Unix epoch.
Is it? What happened in 1970?
I was born.
Oh, nice. Okay. Wait. Okay. And my second question was, you have, for the 1970s metadata label, dApps can define their own optional metadata. Should they not be able to also define their own signatures if they have extra keys they care about, right? So say
but there's only 2 keys in this.
But what if a DApp wants to include an extra key? Say perhaps in Voltaire we have DREP keys.
Well, that's a key. It's a role key. So
yeah, but I see it like a state key, right? Like it's core to the protocol. Yes. And a DApp would want to include it.
Oh, okay. Well,
I just mean, can DApp add extra signatures for extra? Yeah.
Yeah, we could actually. So we could say that, for example, we could say, I'd probably change the numbering here, right? Because we're not fixed to what the original SIPs numbered it. That's why these signatures, I've aligned these with this 1 and 2. So if we've got another if we've got another key, for example, we could say, okay, DREP key could be one of the grouping keys. So we could say 2 is a state key or 3 is a DREP key, and you have one or both. And if you have to have one of them at least. You could have both. You could have either or, and then you put 2 and 3 signature. Yeah, no problem. Are there any other keys you'd want to use there?
No. It's just I'm writing a DREP key SIP at the moment, so that's why.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's a perfectly valid thing. I can see some potential use cases for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, you want to associate your DREP key with, because this is for off-chain stuff. This is layer 2 role-based stuff, right? So because you can't access any of this metadata from a smart contract, so you have to use it off-chain. But something I'm going to look at, I haven't put it in there, and it will be in the SIP when we do it. I'm actually looking at ways we could mirror some of the key data from this in datums, so that it could be used by a smart contract. I can't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And if we can do that, then I have to work out how. And then if we do, then if that's a feature that the DApp uses, the DApp would have to validate that the metadata and the datums match before they would accept it as a valid registration.
And I guess that would allow script-based Catalyst DREPs, right, to register? No.
It would allow things like, well, what it would allow is you would be able to use that data to do things like time lock data, for example, for a surety in a role.
I see, yeah.
Right. But, you can still do if you did the registration wrong and you put the time lock data, the DApp doesn't have to accept it. You've screwed it up, right? But it's time locked. You'll get it back. It's on you, right? But the idea there is to allow things like, because in the current SIPs, they say, oh, in future, we might want to use time lock data, but there's absolutely no way you could possibly do that with the current SIPs, right? So I want to explore what we would need to put in datums to do that, what the key information we'd want to put in there, and how we would encode it, right? But it'd be optional. Mike?
Yeah, so I'm getting away from the guts here a little bit. I've got some more of a conceptual question and what we can start to do with this, but Alex might be trying to piggyback on the conversation. So Alex, please go ahead.
Yes, so yeah, I have a few questions. First, about the app identifier.
Yeah.
For what purpose? The app in this case is, for example, like us, Catalyst, or
yeah. So say for Catalyst, we're going to use this UUID, right? Which isn't properly formed, but it'll be okay because it's the very first one, which spells out Catalyst at the beginning there. That's actually Catalyst in Leap, which is not the right way to make a UUID, but it'll work here, right? And then if another DApp, say a DEX, wants to use this, you want to be able to tell my registrations for Catalyst from a DEX's registrations. You want to be able to clearly distinguish those. You don't want there to be any possibility that you'll pick those up and use them in Catalyst, because they're completely different. They've got a different purpose completely. So the idea there is, my DEX, I just go and use a UUID random generator. I generate a UUID. That's my UUID. That's the one I use. Catalyst won't conflict, neither will anybody else, because it's astronomically remote that you'll pick 2 UUIDs the same, unless you deliberately try and do it, and then you're just making a problem for yourself.
So actually, with this SIP, I'm just trying to understand, we are like considering as a general registration in any, I don't know, kind of event. It could be like voting, as we are doing in Catalyst, or...
Yeah, so it's general in 2 senses. It's general for the fact that it can be voters, proposers, proposal groups, reps, delegations, futures things like tally committees, or any possible role that we could think of in Catalyst. we can just define a new role and register with this format. We just have to define what the rules are for that role, what the what the registration needs to contain. Then, so that's one group. But then you've got every DApp might want to do different roles. So every DApp defines itself its own group. So you've got these roles within these collections of roles. And the collection of roles is defined, or the app is defined by the UUID. So it's a way of making sure that you never collide. And I use the UUID and the role in the derivation of the key so that, you know, a Catalyst voting key in this sense can never be used in another DApp because it won't, it's an invalid key for that DApp. So there's no way that somebody could actually, you know, say, oh, you're signing this thing over here, but then they use it to vote. They trick you and they use the key for a purpose it wasn't ever intended for. The other reason for that is it allows a wallet, if a wallet is smart enough, which it doesn't have to be, but it could, a wallet could actually detect this UUID and go, okay, that's a Catalyst UUID. And if it's got a list of roles, it can say to you when you're signing this, you are signing this as a Catalyst voter. Right?
Yeah,
So the API would say, sign this for this UUID in this role. And so the DApp can actually give more information if it knows what that UUID in that role is. But it doesn't need to. If it doesn't know the UUID in the role, it should just say, you're signing it for this DApp, UUID, role 7. Right? So it allows the wallets to have a better UX, but it's completely optional. They've got a completely, you know, clear fallback mechanism that is only slightly worse than not having that data, you know, having the visual representation. That's the kind of idea that I'm going for here. Right. I mean, you'll notice that there's no DIDs or anything like that. I've got no digital IDs in this because we don't always want them. So that's why I've got this DApp defined metadata, right? And they're a bit obscure as well as how you would actually use them and what you would use depending on the registration. So that's, Jonathan's got a question. Did I answer your question, Alex?
We have a few more, but
all
yeah,
right. We'll go back around. Jonathan?
So in a DREP scenario, you've got a registration. What sort of role signature, stake signature dependencies would you envision? Because you don't want every voter to have to sign something when a new voter comes in and says they're part of this delegation.
No, and they don't. So again, so in this case here, this would be so when you're delegating to a rep, the first thing is the rep would have to register as a rep. It's a different role. So that could be role 1, for example. Voters could be role 0. So a rep registration can only have a single key. It can't be the array type key. A voter can register with an array type key and not sign any of them, which means that they are actually delegating their entire voting power. But if they signed one of them, we can detect that and we can go, oh, actually, they've delegated 50% of their voting power and they're holding 50% of their voting power for themselves. So we can tell the difference between fully delegating or partially delegating. If they have, in a potential scenario, it would depend on the wallet. If say the wallet had multiple stake addresses within it, like Typhon can do, right? You can just create multiple accounts. It would be possible for the wallet to create a registration that actually tied all of the voting keys that they had together in one voting key and could sign them all and create a registration that helped link them together, right? Or create multiple registrations that help link them together by signing the same voting key for all of the different stake addresses. So it means that as long as you can sign that data, you've proved that you control it, we trust it. So if your voter uses the same key over and over, as long as they've proven they own it, we trust that's true, that you haven't delegated it. Because to get that key, you've derived that from your main account's root key, which means you've basically given somebody access to your entire wallet. Right. So
regards voting power.
It's not the sort of thing you would do just to give somebody some voting power. give them access to the entire wallet.
Right. And so then the next voting event comes up. Sorry. And the voter is changing who they're delegating to.
They would have to re-register potentially. So the idea here is, and we do this already in Catalyst. So if you've got an invalid registration of any sort, we exclude it from the snapshot. So we do a snapshot and we get all of your registrations and then we validate them. And then any that are invalid, we throw away and we take your most recent valid registration. So say now you want to delegate, you register as a voter and you've got an individual registration and now you want to delegate to Ryan for some strange reason. You would delegate to Ryan and you could say, but it only lasts to the end of Fund 10. So at the end of Fund 10, that registration is actually now invalid because the time is gone. And so your actual voter registration that you placed before that is now your most recent valid registration. So it gives you a way to actually have a fallback. So in this case here, if you delegated to somebody and their voting key is gone, they've changed it. They no longer exist as a rep, or that voting key is invalid. We can validate, we can check that and go, oh, you actually delegated to somebody that does not exist. That is invalid. You've now got your original voting registration. So even if somebody pulled the rug on you at the 11th hour, you could fire up the app and go, oh, hang on a second, my DREP disappeared. Oh, at least I can still vote.
Nice.
Right. I mean, that's what we're trying to, without it, and it's sort of just, it's the data that drives it. There's no actual rule in there except that this is invalid, therefore the last one is valid. So we would make rules like if you register, you have to register as a voter first. Then you register as a rep, and that's a separate registration. And we can check then you've got a voter's registration, you've got a rep. Okay, good. You're a rep, right? And then you can, as a voter, then you can delegate, and then you can choose what you do, right? Clearly, if you delegate forever, you have to do another registration to supersede it. So.
Nice.
I mean, this is going to need, so we've got this, we're going to have to actually have a wallet extension to support this clearly, right? So that, because the wallets have to sign this data, that can't. So we need a wallet extension that will be able to take this and produce this registration and sign it and put it on chain for the person. And we'll need the wallets to actually support the encryption as well. So there'll be rather than there be a Catalyst, like SIP62 that does it all, I'm going to do a SIP that just does the wallet bit for this. So this is a SIP by itself. There'll be a SIP that does the wallet extension by itself for this, so they're independent. And then Catalyst will have its own SIP to do its own things for voting. So there'll be 3 SIPs effectively that will sort of clean that up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Mike, do you want to interject here, or are you going to segue?
Yeah, so I kind of related to the question that Alex posed, and being able to share role registrations across different dApps. And you mentioned that it'll be defined that this will just be really a building block basically for dApp developers in general. It won't just be for Catalyst, but as any other dApp, I can use this to define roles and access control within my dApp. And I'm wondering kind of if you could say a little bit about just kind of exploring the flip side of that. Does this become kind of interoperable? So if I wanted to piggyback on an existing registration that is specific to Catalyst, could I take that and use that in an entirely new context? As a very simple example, say, my voter registration allows me to access, say like a Discord server, just like a very basic like token gating example. Can other dApps start to piggyback on these, or say, a proposer registration, I can go on Lado Nation to claim my proposer profile?
Yes, so because we define the UUID when we say this is the UUID you use for Catalyst registrations. So anybody can use that now. So Lido can make an app and say, well, we want you to prove that you're a Catalyst proposer, right? They can do that through their wallet. And they can do that, then they can get the registration information on chain. So it's not tied to Catalyst. Now, say you had another system, say you were doing another voting system that was very much like Catalyst, and you actually wanted to use all the same roles, but you wanted it to be clear that Catalyst registrations were for Catalyst, and this is by some other thing, and I want it to be for this other thing. you could actually take all the rules for that and just change the UUID. And so now you've got all the same roles. There's a different UUID for that. Same rules apply. Our tooling will work because in our tooling, we'll have the UUID as a parameter, right? That says this is the snapshot we're doing for this. The other thing that I'm looking at doing potentially is actually doing snapshots for different roles at different times. So I actually think there's some value in saying that reps, their rep registration has to be finalized, say 2 weeks before voters finalize their registration, so that the reps are locked in stone. The voters now have 2 weeks to sort out their delegations before they're locked in stone. Right. So this is the sort of stuff I want to look at as well. And this allows it because it means that we can do a snapshot for all the delegates at 2 weeks before the voting snapshot finishes, because we know what delegates are. They're role one. They're completely independent from voters. So then even if that delegate did other things, weird things, they would be locked in at that point. So there's all these sorts of, and proposers, the proposals get done at, different timing to voting. So they would have to be locked in for their proposals at a particular point in time. That's different to the voters, and being able to independently distinguish all of these roles. And, so Fund 11, you've got to be in by this time for proposing. It makes it a lot easier for us to actually generate the tooling for that.
So like when we talk about this just as a building block, there are varying degrees of flexibility where you could pick up an existing registration as is, whether it's Catalyst or something that someone else has defined. You can take an existing one and add new checks to it, new logic to check, maybe Catalyst looks for this thing, but I want to layer on these 5 other checks that might incorporate DIDs or something else, or kind of start entirely from scratch and build your own role registration that then becomes something that someone else could pick up and use in different contexts.
Yeah, and so when we do the documentation for this, so this is the basic registration. I'll have to do a Catalyst document that says, this is how voters work. This is how reps work. This is how delegation works. This is how proposers work. This is how, and from this, people will actually go, oh, okay, I see how the composability of this hangs together. And even if they don't particularly want to use exactly the way we've done it, there's going to be a guide, there's basically a guidebook that says, these are all the different ways you can actually plug this thing together, because I'm going to be using most of them. So, right, that I can think of. And there may be others, but at least it gives you some templates to say, okay, these are the sorts of things you can do with this. Ken's got a question. He hasn't had one yet. I know Ryan's desperate to ask another question. We get to give everybody a go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, say if you want some optional process for validating representatives or something that maybe certain voters would be interested in, like, would that fit into this framework?
So I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying,
so like something that would, some optional process that like say a DREP would want to go through, that maybe a certain subset of the community sees as an important thing, or something that they would want to see.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, the original, like in the voting center that we've got there, that was originally built around the concept of there being centralized management for the reps. Right. I don't think we want to have, that reps must be centrally managed. We want to be able to manage it generally. But I think it's definitely possible that we could have the ability, and that's what that extra data is in the registration, so that a rep could say, well, actually, I've done, a school that, there was a Catalyst proposal that set up a DREP training session, right? And I've actually gone through that, and they've issued me an ATALA credential. They could attach that to their registration. So then they're saying, well, not only am I registering as a DREP, but here's my credential that says I've done this thing. And they're saying that you're a good DREP. Or, Lido Nation could run a training course and they could issue a credential. And so, or there could be a centralized database that just says, okay, these are the people that I've actually vetted, and it could be a third group that are doing this. So whatever the voters want to use to actually help them choose a good quality DREP, that's up to them. and that I want to build this so that it's possible for those things to happen, so that we end up with an ecosystem of validation and training and all of these things, not just one group that can do it because that they happen to have to keep control of all of the data. We're trying to make it that that's not the case at all, and that it's just an open system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Thanks.
Maybe just to elaborate on that a little bit, right? If there's some additional credential that the community thinks is super important, right? Maybe to be a DREP, you only have this one prerequisite. Now, all of a sudden, 80% of DREPs, the ones that are really moving the needle and making, positive contributions, there's nothing that stops us to say, oh, now in, fund 30, whatever it is, we're actually going to make it to be a DREP. You not only need this basic registration, but you do need that other attestation. You do need that, the learning credential or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and we don't have to change the SIP to do that. We can just say from Fund 12, this is the new standard for validation for a DREP registration. This is the new minimum that has to happen. But I know Ryan's desperate to ask me another question, but I'm going to throw it to Darlington.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad I caught you guys. I thought I was going to miss you because I had a feeling for somebody. But the presentation was great in the main town hall. I think I maybe understand why, but I was shocked when I heard the phrase only do this on Project Catalyst.io. Like that seems counterproductive to what we've been saying about an open system. So what's the deal? Are there sensitive stuff in the QR code, or what's the deal there?
There is. So that's why we don't want. Right. So the QR code is your voting key. It is
the voting key is in there. Okay.
Yes. So if that, and we don't collect that. That's held within the browser when you do it, right? But you can imagine the potential if somebody does a different website to do the same thing.
Not the private key though, right? Like the private key is in the QR code. Oh,
it has to be because
that's why you have to pin. Okay,
it's not signing the votes. The voting app is currently signing the votes, so that's what's in the QR code. So it is a security sensitive thing. So there's no the voting app is legacy. We've had it for a long time. We would like to get off it and have the wallet sign the votes, and that's what we're actually talking about now, is fixing the delegation and fixing the wallet signing for the votes and things. But that's Yep.
Sorry. So can I show you something super quick?
Yep.
So for the CCV4 vote, we did something like this where we sort of was trying to figure out these different ranges, and specifically these two charts, this chart here, and then this chart here that shows the ATH power ranges. Wanting to do something for the Fund 10 registration like that. So the snapshot, obviously we can take our own snapshot, but it's not going to be the same time as your snapshot. Is your snapshot going to be public? Like, are you going to?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to release
Not only
that.
is our snapshot going to be public, but the parameters we use to make it are going to be public, so you can run it again and validate it. Right.
Is that going to be when it's taken, or are you going to wait till next year?
When it's taken. Before
okay, good.
Day or so after
good.
snapshot, we get a chance to publish it. We'll publish the parameters and the actual raw snapshot data. Right.
He hasn't been paying attention. Now I know. Now I caught him red-handed. all the talk about the encrypted tally and snapshot, all of those fancy, basically all the data, you will be able to create an overview of like what kind of wallets are actually included in snapshot data. So everything what you have there, you'll be able to feed that with actual Fund 10 outcome.
You're right. What hasn't been clear to me right now is just because I know a lot of things are still interim. So the cadence of when stuff is created and when they're accessible to Lighter Nation isn't super clear yet.
Well,
That's
we
why I
want to
keep
be, we want to
asking
be
and keep confirming.
as possible, Darlington. My aim is to get you stuff as the moment we make it. So for Fund 10, that's still, we've still got manual things in there, but for Fund 11, it'll be automated. It'll be going through that automated system. You'll be able to pull the data out of the API. So part of the feedback we want from you is look at the API that we've got, look at the data that we're currently serving, and say, well, actually, is there data that you're not serving that I would want? And they'll let us know. I'm not promising that I'll serve it to you, but you know, if you don't tell me, then I can't serve it to you.
Yeah, well, I got the little GitHub notification this morning that says something voting power, something. So that's exactly the data I been actually trying to get, or be in a position to be able to generate once the snapshot happens.
So you should,
I don't think
query
it's
now. If you know the public key, you can or the stake address, you can actually query our backend now in the testnet and query any registered wallet, any registered voter.
Okay, and so that's what I'm gonna try, because what I did yesterday actually was just got all the metadata and got the data that way. But I will check out the API and see if does it have I can just look. I don't have to take time here. Okay, well, great. Thank you.
No worries, Darlington. Ryan, I finally get back to you.
Hi. How does your new registration deal with multi-stake key wallets?
Well, so the wallet that's going to be up to the wallet. So I'm going to talk about that in the SIP.
Okay.
All right. So the wallet could generate multiple registrations.
Okay. Yeah.
One for each
multiple transactions, right?
Yeah. The other option that we could have, and that's something we can discuss with the wallets when we're formalizing this, is we could actually put an array in there, but there's a downside in that all of a sudden you're going to lose the benefit of having a multi-stake key wallet, which is dividing up your funds amongst multiple stake keys, because now I can associate them together.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So I kind of feel like even though all these things are technically possible in a multi-stake key wallet, you probably won't want to make individual registrations.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
But we can talk. I mean, that's the sort of thing we can put words in the SIP and say that's open. That's up to the wallet what it can do, what it wants to do there. But I kind of feel like it's an anti-feature. But I mean, let's get there. Yeah. I mean, we've got that consultation time, right? If we get Catalyst Voices up where we do this properly, right? So that's when we actually get the wallets to say, what do they think? What do we?
And also, like, there's like 2 multi-stake wallets, and I think they do it differently. And how Lace are going to do it is also different. Is how, and also hardware wallets.
If they're HD compliant, they should be the same.
Yeah, but they do different way. They do it different ways.
Then they're not. Then one of them don't conform to the SIP that says how to do it.
Yeah, I know.
So
because the turn of the list, but they just make multiple accounts and let you access them at once.
They don't kind of multi-stake. They don't derive it from master key. I mean, they don't have to. Even the SIP doesn't. I mean, there's no rule that says you can't have. I mean, how is that any different to having actual multiple wallets in your browser? Like having actual, like,
wow, it's not, is it really? Yeah.
Not. So it's a nonsense to say that they can't do that. I think that's fine, but then they're independent.
Yeah, of course. But
right. So I honestly think don't know the answer to the question, because I can see pros and cons.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my follow up is hardware wallet support.
For signing it, so you're only signing the hash.
Yeah.
So if the hardware wallet can't take the entire metadata, it'll take the hash. And this is something I want to talk to the software wallets about, because the DAT never talks directly to the hardware wallet.
No, of course, yeah.
It always goes through the software wallet. So in the case where the hardware wallet can't do it, I think the software wallet should show this is the metadata we're signing, this is its hash, And then the hardware wallet can say, this is the hash and I want to sign this. So you can validate this against this, and it's not the DApp that actually made up any of that. So you've still got separation of concerns. And the hardware wallet's still holding the keys.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay, cool.
All right. It's just the hardware wallet's going to have to be able to do this key derivation for the voting.
Yeah, they're not going to like that.
I've been having a look at it. I can't see really where the major concern will be. It's not going to make any serious difference to the size of their code base.
They just want to audit it on every change, I think.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, I can't not propose it.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. When you show that diagram from the, if I can find it, from the slide, did I see an endpoint to submit?
There will be eventually. There's not an
right.
There is an endpoint to submit votes. It's into the Jormungandr node. But you need to be able to sign fragments. And you can't do that if you don't have any of the keys. Sign the fragment. Right. So again, so you can have a look at the voting center in testnet, because it's actually, that's what it's doing. But we've got, as we were talking about before, there are issues with the registration for reps and the current registrations that we want to fix. That's what Catalyst Voices is all about, really, is fixing the registrations for, well, it's a huge piece of it. It's not all of it, but it is a fundamental piece.
So people will need to re-register, right? Because there are already D-reps in the current registrations.
Yeah, they don't work. The SIP36 D-reps don't. That's what we just discussed before you came in. There's all
they don't work.
You can have a look through the recording again, Darlington, and actually, if you have any questions after it, you can feel free to reach out to me and ask. Right, but yeah, so we talked about there's some issues with the current registrations for D-reps and some vulnerabilities, not least of which we can't tell the difference between a voter and a rep. So it makes it very difficult to validate things. There's a whole bunch of things we can't validate.
Right.
Something we were actually floating around the other day was the concept of actually having a technical town hall like the regional town halls, but having it, say, maybe every 2 weeks or something, where we actually just have, it's just for Catalyst community to come together and talk technical, and have, not just from Catalyst, but from anybody who wants to come and actually talk, present something technically about Catalyst or their proposals or whatever. So we can actually try and build up a bit more of a technical community. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that. I think that might even be a lot more productive, or maybe not, but I feel like it might be productive if we're at the point too where what you guys are working on were represented in GitHub.
Well, yeah, I mean, we want to be able to have, if we're doing development, we want to be able to have constant, and it's better if we have a known touch point where we could come in and say, okay, this is the stuff we're building, this is what we're working on, or if there's issues in GitHub, and we can come and actually discuss them with the community directly, or, there's voter registration stuff, but otherwise it's a bit ad hoc. We're kind of like, okay, how do we talk to these people? And then we want to get the dApps and the wallets together in the same room as us, and then have a conversation about things like registration formats, and maybe we can get the hardware wallets to come and say something. All right, I don't know, but if we've got a place and we know this is where we go every 2 weeks, and we actually have these sort of technical conversations, and like I said, I wouldn't want to be there every 2 weeks just presenting everything myself. I'd want this to be a community thing, right?
That's what I was saying. Do you know when or if the Catalyst core dev team is going to move from Jira to GitHub, or is that
yes,
on the
yeah.
milestone?
So we're currently clearing our Jira backlog. We actually have internal constraints. Mike might be able to tell you a bit more about this, seeing as I try to stay away from Jira. But we do have internal management constraints, so we still have to use Jira. But at the end of Fund 10, we're going to put all of our repos there that are open source. All of the issues that we work through and the Kanban and everything will be in GitHub for the development stuff. We'll just track the top level features and things inside Jira so that it won't affect the development side. Everything will be in there. So that way we can better collaborate. But we're currently working through our backlog and then, grooming all of that stuff ready for that switch over.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. And then I think, people will come to these town halls with better questions and stuff and content.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, we can't keep developing in Jira and then you don't see anything except updates. It's not a conducive way to attract people to actually look at it, to contribute, to feed through issues, because it looks like there's nothing going on when there's actually a ton going on. There actually has been an internal sticking point for a while, and we've been working through that. But there's other tribes now in IO that are doing this now, so it's not untested ground.
Well, not the next few months, because it is heavily glued to Lido Nation. But the Catalyst Explorer is going open source and getting his own domain and saying goodbye to Lido. Hopefully this winter that'll be a project.
Maybe you could do a fully decentralized Catalyst Explorer. Doesn't even have any centralized infrastructure.
Yeah, that sounds like a narration. That would be great. I mean, the Game Changer team did manage to tokenize and get all the proposals. I think it was Fund 7 on chain at one point.
But we're getting so many proposals now. I'd be sure it's a lot of data to put on chain.
It is, but I feel like IPFS could be a good layer. Yeah, good layer for it. I don't know what abstraction exists in that world for fast readability, or if I will still have to
come to our after town hall next week, and I'll tell you.
Oh, okay, great, excellent. I hope I'm not having to fill in again for anybody, so I can come at the beginning. But
oh wait, all right, I'll do it again just for you.
No, I will watch out for this recording though to get the first bits of it. But I like that. I mean, I like a fully decentralized Catalyst Explorer type situation. Although the kinds of experiments we want to run. There's a lot of experiments we want to run that comes before voting. So I don't know. We'll see. Neat. Cool. I'm really happy for where the tech is going. When I got the update this morning about the voting power, I was really excited. Was planning to test it out tonight. I didn't even realize you're going to be presenting. So cool.
So yeah, I mean, if you have any issues at all, Darlington, with the APIs or anything that we published, just throw some issues in GitHub. We do actually read them and look at them, so they are there. We do that. So that's possibly the fastest way you'll get a response, right? But if you've got questions about what we discussed in this meeting, right, or anything else, you can ping me. It goes for anybody.
Okay. Neat. Well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna get back to writing code.
Any other questions before we? Ryan's looks like he's got another question that he wants to ask.
Wow, I wasn't going to, but okay. When's Catalyst registering in the SIP process?
At the end of Fund 10, if we get operations. At the moment, at the moment, I've told you before, Ryan, I don't feel like that we've got a sufficient mandate to be the one that says Catalyst can register in the SIP process. Right? If we have operations, and that's part of operations, we can register in the SIP process.
Oh, I mean, that makes sense. I don't remember talking about that. Cool. Okay, I'll look forward to that.
Many times. I said that to you in Edinburgh, even.
Listening then.
You don't listen to me because you're like, no, I still want you to do it. No, it's important. I think we should register in the SIP process, right? It's just like, you know, if we're not the ones that end up doing fund operations, it should be up to them to choose, do they register in the SIP process, because they're the ones that are going to have to manage it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
All right.
There was just Danny had put into the chat a good question about can voters still have partial use of their vote power? So if they've delegated,
yes.
So, but is that restricted to what they declare up front? So they're giving 50% to the DREP and then they retain 50% for themselves to then put into votes, or can we do some kind of layering where? No, I guess not, because you need to define exactly how much went where.
Yeah, the otherwise we can't calculate it. So there needs to be, if you split your voting power up, you need to be clear about who gets what, right, of your voting power. One of the things that I mentioned before, right, where you could have a registration and then if that goes invalid, you actually get your most recent. One of the things you could actually do there is you could say, well, your registration might go invalid to a DREP if the DREP gets saturated, because the DREP can't. So we don't want to have a situation where somebody, you know, basically loses their voting power because the DREP they rep to is saturated, and now that DREP can't actually vote with their voting power. So in that case, what would happen is that saturated registration would actually be invalid under the rules of that, and so you could actually get your next most recent registration. So you could actually say, well, I want to give 100% of my voting power to Ryan, but if he gets saturated, I'll give 100% of my voting power to Mike, and if he gets saturated, then I'll just vote myself. So it gives you, so you just place them in the reverse order on chain as the order of your preference, and then whichever one is the most valid, that's the one that will apply. So it actually gives us some of this capability kind of for free. Just which one's the valid one? That's the one that works.
So to the point of what Jonathan was picking upon, I think one of the early hypotheses early last year was that, like, if I delegate my voting power to the DREP, you know, I trust them to vote on everything. Maybe there is a proposal or 2 or 5 that I would like to cast a vote myself after I've delegated everything to him. They go along, they probably cast a vote already one way or another. When I come in, can I override the DREP choice, essentially, from my own perspective? Because I know that was a hypothesis that Kevin and the group were talking about last week, and I know we had a couple of breakout sessions like this around it, and it seemed to have been a possibility, but maybe that already has changed. Then even I need to correct my assumptions in a way that once the DREP casts a vote, me as an individual, I couldn't come and override him on some of the proposals, and essentially recording my latest preference and overriding what he did while keeping everything else he did intact.
No, you can't, because he's only got one set of voting power, which is the total. So you can't. But you're trying to unscramble an egg. So once you've if it proves everything's valid and he's got your voting power, then you can't take it away from everything else and keep the tally because of the way the encryption works. So it's not possible to actually override it, right? Given the way the blockchain and the encrypted tally works, there's no way to unscramble that egg once his voting power is assigned. Does that?
Yeah, I'll think about it. Darlington, thanks.
Oh, Ken had his hand up, and so
if they're in order, then I think. Oh, okay, yeah, he dropped.
Ken did, and then he dropped, and then he come back again.
Good eye.
Like it was directly related to what Daniel was talking about. Yeah, like there were some assumptions that maybe there's a certain subset of the votes that you're very interested in voting yourself, but there's other categories that you really would rather just delegate that to somebody. And so like within the current framework, it looks like that's not possible, but that would be very, very useful for people.
Yeah, I mean, given the current crypto and the current way we're doing the voting and thinking about it for 5 seconds, sorry, as Mike said, we could probably do it to the challenge level, where you could delegate for every challenge except this challenge. But I think there would be significant technical impediments to actually doing it to a proposal within a challenge, but letting the DREP vote on the other proposals because of the way voting power is assigned.
Yeah, I think that would be an acceptable compromise. That's like if you know that the category is something that you're really an expert in or something.
Yeah.
And it's something you're very interested in, that would be probably fine.
Yeah, it's definitely something we can look at. It's a good call out.
By the way, just to continue, can we in this case, I mean, like restrict for certain challenges or proposals, whatever, but for delegations? So it means that I'm delegating my voting power, but not for these challenges.
That's probably what I would, if we did it that way, that's probably how I would do it. So when you delegate, in the delegation, you would have an optional section which says you're delegating this challenge, this challenge, this challenge, this challenge, this challenge, or which would be the default. So if you specify it, any that you don't specify, you're not delegating. So that would actually allow you to delegate to, I could delegate to you, Alex, for these 3 challenges. I could delegate to Mike for another 6, and then I could delegate, and then any that I didn't delegate like that, I can vote for myself. It does make the voting power snapshot a bit more complex, but if we keep it in the challenge thing, I think that's definitely in the realms of doable. All right. Darlington?
This is a random question, but I was wondering, how do you guys ship stuff to prod?
We tag it, and then the SRE pushes it to prod with his SRE.
Oh, so you have like a whole SRE people. Do you know what do they use it? Is it Earth? It's not Earthly, right? Like what
No, we don't use it Earthly. We've got it's a Kubernetes stack that we run in the back end. So they've got CI/CD tooling in there that actually manages that, but we don't auto deploy to prod.
Okay, so I thought it was a Kubernetes thing, which is why I was surprised that there wasn't any Helm charts. So is it a different? Is it a? I guess it's not Helm. You don't have to use Helm or Kubernetes. Like, how do you manage? Maybe you don't know since you have an SRE person.
No,
but how do you manage the Kubernetes primitives, like the deployments and the stateful sets and stuff? And
it's
versioning.
Complex. It's complex, and we try and avoid it as much as possible, all stateful sets and things as possible. But it is complex, and that's what the SRE waves is magic SRE wand over.
Oh so, man, that must be nice.
It is, right? But that's and because we know that Kubernetes is difficult that way, and you really can't, even if we published it, you couldn't pick it up and use it because it doesn't work that way. It's got to, what's your ingress like? What's your, it's so, it's, you can rebuild it, but you can't really use it as is. Like if we went to Google, we're on AWS, we went to Google, we'd have to rebuild it, right? It'd still be Kubernetes. A lot of it would still work, but we'd still have to rebuild it. So it does pose challenges that way. That's one of the reasons we went with Earthly and Docker, is because it shows how the stack works, in a really simple, straightforward way. If somebody wants to go down the road of working out how to make that work in Kubernetes, that's a job for them, because it's a deployment issue, right? It's not.
By them, you mean me. Got it.
Do you want to run Catalyst in Kubernetes?
Well, Kubernetes is what I use for my backend too.
Oh, okay.
And one of my proposal was to create Kubernetes Helm charts. Because I mean GitLab does it, and GitLab is pretty complex, but they have a Helm chart that will spin everything up.
We can look at it, right? I can. There are issues, clearly, right? But whatever we can share, we will share. So I'll try and see what we can do.
And I know the Dandelion team also.
A lot of it's scripted, and because of the environments, the way they set up, and with nicks and all sorts of stuff, you probably don't want to.
Well, nobody wants nicks. But if you've got like
everybody and I
a little bit of customized here, a little bit of Helm there, maybe a sprinkle of Bash, I think that would meet a lot of the people's need who might want to run the stack for some reason. But you don't have to worry about that. There's a proposal on the ballot of Maine trying to figure that out. So maybe it would be a fool's errand, but we'll find out.
All right. Any other questions before I call? Oh my God, it's 3 a.m.
Yes, time to wrap it up, also for the sake of the viewers on the YouTube. So I would suggest to maybe have some closing remarks, and then we can stop the recording at least.
Well, I don't know what to say. Mike, you want some closing remarks?
We've been all over the place. What was the topic? Continuous testnet?
Yeah.
Catalyst Testnet.
Catalyst Testnet. I mean, Catalyst Testnet, open for business, baby. Come on in and start building against it. Maybe just to highlight a little bit, definitely, I guess if you're watching this, you've already looked at the presentation, but yeah, the role-based access control, I think, is going to be something really critical for us to get our heads around in the coming months, looking ahead to Fontaine, solving issues with delegation. But not only that, if we can have this building block just for dApp developers on Cardano in general, having it be extensible for Catalyst to not only support all the roles we've got now, but different roles like decentralized auditors, getting community reviewers, proposal registrations, all the above. I think it's going to unlock a lot of exciting stuff. So yeah, don't know if that quite summarizes the call, but nice place to end it on, maybe.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Cheers, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.